Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damani Corbin, and I'm the Vice President of Economic Development here at Blacks on Wall Street. But specifically, as it relates to technology, I work at a startup technology company out of Europe called Weaveworks. So certainly in the cloud native DevOps space. And for those of you, if you don't mind turning on your camera, the purpose of this session was to actually have an interactive time speaking about how to include or advance the how to make the tech ecosystem in Syracuse a little bit more inclusive. And I certainly have ideas because I spent about 5 years in Syracuse. I'm actually a double alumni of Lemoyne College. So from 2004-ish till 2010, 11, I spent a lot of time in the Syracuse, New York area. So I want to know who's in the room. I see Earl, I see Juhanna, I see Marcus, Terry. I don't see a face. But for us to have this interactive conversation, we wanted to have some ideas, and I'm just supposed to be facilitating. So although I do have a full presentation that I can run for you for the next 35 minutes, it'd be great to kind of understand who's in the room and what type of input would you have, or what are you looking to see from an inclusivity standpoint in terms of the tech sector in Syracuse, New York. If somebody wants to start off with an intro, that'd be great. So I know who's in the room and how I can tailor the conversation to fit.
Hi, Damani. This is Dr. Rogers. I'm jumping in. While I'm engaged in this work, I think the beauty of having this space that has been coordinated is to really kind of understand the gaps. Like, I think we're doing a great job of knowing, at least here in Syracuse, that this effort to diversify the industry has to be multi-layered, right? Like, it's got to involve community, it's got to involve the workforce, it's got to involve the educational institutions. But what is it that, now that we have folks at the table, what might we be missing, right? Always asking that questions about the gaps. And so I'm here specifically in this session because I wanted to hear from other folks, maybe their ideas, feedback on what we've talked about over the last day and a half so far, or just from their own personal experiences. What is it that they are seeing that's not being addressed, that needs to be put on the table so that we can consider it as we're looking at developing strategies and responses to diversifying our local system?
Dr. Rogers, thank you for that. And just to note, Marcus is posting a Jamboard link in the chat. Collaborate on, and I'm monitoring that simultaneously. But to Dr. Rogers' comment, what are we seeing or what are we not seeing in the tech ecosystem in Syracuse that you may want to address?
Is this an open question?
That is an open question, and Jan Keefe, I appreciate you unmuting yourself and joining us. So that means that you might have something to share with us today.
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting question, because as we know, like the reasons why we see such an underrepresentation of Black people or people of color in general represented in the tech space in Syracuse is because of a lot of like interconnecting challenges and equity limitations and just systematic issues that they're facing. So when I think about, okay, what is a meaningful solution? Like what's the actual way for us to solve this? I know that it has to start by recognizing every interconnected system at play that is preventing them. And I know that if I don't start the conversation with acknowledging that, and my solution doesn't recognize that and center that fact, then I know it's only a surface level solution. So, and I know it won't actually have the impact that I expect. And an example is like, say, like if I have if I create a jobs training program, but my program doesn't acknowledge the fact that Syracuse is still dealing with racism here, like discrimination still, then I may miss the fact that while I've trained these people to have the skills, they're still having challenges gaining employment because employers aren't willing to hire them. So I think the way I approach it is like any solution, I really grade it against how much does it take into account all of these other factors, which is hard, but it's really the only way to have a meaningful change that we all want to see.
Yeah, Keith, I certainly appreciate that comment. And just to add in and put some numbers to what you're saying, it's not just a Syracuse problem. This is a problem across the tech ecosystem. So if you aren't aware, the two highest paid industries in the U.S. are finance and technology. And when you look at those two industries, African Americans specifically are stuck at 2%. It's actually called the 2% phenomenon, in that in any industry since slavery up to today, African Americans still only hold 2% of the wealth in this country and haven't gained past that point. So when you look at from a tech industry, we've been hovering around 2%. If you look at larger tech organizations, your Googles, your Apples, your Facebooks, your Twitters, they have slightly increased to around 6 or 7%. But those numbers don't fully represent the entire tech ecosystem. When we come back down, it's still at 2%. So you're 100% right, Yankeef. We need to first acknowledge that there is an issue. But what I would tell you and the rest of the folks in Syracuse is this: we don't need everybody. Activism is a big, heavy lift. So there are enough individuals and companies that are supposedly part of the choir. So my advice would be, let's start focusing on the folks who are on board, because trying to change the mindsets of everybody, it's a job in itself. So for this forum, specifically, my advice for the community would be, we don't need everybody. Let's start working with who we have and who's on board and helping and training. Two, Yankeef, I like to also lay the groundwork for two terms that's heard in this space. One, diversity. Two, inclusion. Diversity is a management practice. So we need to understand that from the leadership level, there needs to be a commitment to what are we going to do from a diversity perspective. So before your employees that you're trying to include in that environment, you need to understand that we need to change that leadership model. So if we don't have leadership that's buying into that there needs to be a diverse culture, then the work from inclusivity won't happen. And the inclusivity and the inclusive piece is an internal practice that is replicated through all of these different departments. So I like to kind of set the groundwork that we understand when we talk about D&I and DEI, equity piece, we include there as well, that we understand what's happening. So yeah, but I feel you, Yankeef. Anybody else want to jump in? I could continue to riff off of that piece for a little bit, but I'll stop for a second just to see if anyone else had a comment.
So I was going to jump in. I was going in probably a whole different area, but I could touch upon some of what you said. Absolutely starts at the top in any organization. You have good leadership and it's going to trickle down. You have bad leadership, it's going to cause a cancer, right? My mind originally was going towards the question, I guess, of, is it a training issue of getting the tools needed in the right areas? Is it a making sure the opportunities are conveyed to the right people in the right areas as well? I work in marketing, so I'm always, my thought is always, you go where the people are. You go where you want to reach a more diverse population. You go to the different areas to share the opportunities, and you have to be intentional about that if you're going to be true to the diversity, inclusion, and equity in your organization. So are you using tactics and tools to truly get the message where they're going to hear it, where they're going to see it? or are you doing the same old type of recruitment tactics you've always done? So I guess there's two thoughts there. Is it, do we need to provide better tools on a training standpoint to get more diverse population going into technology, and or do we need to recruit more proactively and innovatively to get the opportunities in front of the diverse population? That's where my mind was going.
I appreciate that. So I'll ask Marcus to I'm going to put my ideas out based on what I've seen and what I've researched and what's working, or some philosophies. So Sean Rochester, he's the author of the book, The Black Tax, The Cost of Being Black in America. And his solution that he puts out at the end of that book was PhD. And this is the philosophy for economic inclusivity across America. And the PhD stands for purchase, hire, and deposit. And I think that that is not just on an individual level, that can be replicated on an institutional level as well. So where you spoke about was hiring, and I can dig deep in that a little bit, but I just wanted to put out how I think we can use PhD in the tech space. So we can add that there. And then I'm not sure if we have any technology founders or software developers on the call, but I decided to select Yankeef. Thanks for raising a hand. I see you there. Anyone else, feel free to jump in. If I'm not seeing your face, I know we have 26 other folks on the call. It makes it a little bit difficult to interact and see the interactions and the faces. So I'm not able to go back and forth with you.
So I was going to say this, Damani, and this is Donna. Let me come on video. You can see me. One of the things I propose, if people don't want to come on to video, just post your questions in the chat, as we mentioned at the top of the event, and then we can read the questions on your behalf, or Damani can read them and respond that way. And there are some items, Damani, out there on the board too, you know, that kind of give you some topical ideas. Yeah, but again, to everyone that's shy, video, if you don't, a lot of times, or just unmute and ask your question that way too. All right, thank you.
I appreciate that, Donna. I appreciate that, and that's absolutely the role of a great facilitator, and that is what's called inclusivity. And in the nature of this topic, I'll say this: don't invite me to your party and don't play no music that I can dance to. Right? So it's one thing when we talk about inclusivity and being inclusive in these environments. The first is the people inside the party need to say that we need to invite some other people in, and that's just one step of the process. And then two, another step is play some music that I can relate to when I'm inside of the party so that I can maybe dance and also participate in some of this fun. And then three would not just for me to enjoy my music, but to pull me aside and maybe teach me some of your music, or to teach me a dance or two of yours. And again, I'm boiling this down for an analogy for us to kind of relate to. But if you think about the corporate culture, you know, it's heavily white male dominated. So if it is that we don't feel comfortable, or when we get into a room, we cannot show our face, we don't feel like we can bring our whole selves to work. You know, Dr. Rogers, I love you here, and I'm happy that you have it out. And these type of things on these calls, appreciate is not the norm. These are the barriers that are set so that you are actually excluding talent that's coming in. And the one thing I want to put out there was that it's not a pipeline problem. So let's stop the myth. If we hear it's a pipeline problem, we need to double click. If this is someone, an organization that is potentially on board, and you hear the reaction that is a pipeline problem, you just need to stop and double click to educate. I'll stop. Can someone give me some info that might be on the board? Oh, sorry. But some info that was on the board, but there were two things that I wanted to leave. I gave you PhD, and the second one I wanted to give you were 3 development principles. One is agile methodology. 2 is declarative programming. And 3 is data-driven decisions. So if Marcus can add those 2 different areas on the board, that'd be appreciated. And I wanted to maybe come back to those towards the end when we start talking about solutions. At this point, I want to hear some feedback and thoughts. Dr. Rogers, you were about to say something.
You said agile
methodology.
Mm-hmm. I love the invitation to the dance analogy and playing some music. I think it's Peter King put on the board, how does geography matter? And I think the opening remarks by Anthony Frazier, I think really hit home for me in that. And one of the things that Anthony spoke about in that session that I think we could deconstruct a little bit, he definitely used some cultural language there, but he talked about not reinventing the wheel, right? Not reinventing the wheels, but putting some rims on it and talking about the importance of grassroots efforts and how when we're thinking about technology, we are often talking about a very white male dominated space. And so how can we connect to folks of color within the community that are already gathering and maybe introduce or learn from them some perspectives on technology? That's some of the work that Marcus Webb is doing, Kira Crawford on our team. And I think, Peter, your question about how does geography matter, when you're coming from like urban centers like Syracuse or as Anthony pointed out, Newark, where you're consistently bombarded with negative and deficit messaging about your community and where you're from, it also begins to play back on where it is you belong and what spaces you can come into. And so in our geographic footprint, urban environment, Syracuse, or even the rural environments, are folks looking at technology as an outlet or opportunity for historically marginalized folks to become a part of? And the answer realistically is no. And so how do we interrupt that? How do we invite them to the dance? How do we learn from them, as well as begin to create a platform to share our knowledge?
So that was quite the multi-tiered question. I'd like to split those apart into, like, one was more of a community engagement focused, and I would say that is a separate battle. I think what I am more focused on is that there's a system in Syracuse. There's organizations who have received funding, who's currently hiring, employing, and there's enough talent that already exists. So I was more so looking at what are we doing with these organizations to help create the opportunities and make sure that, there's a pipeline that we can start to usher in. And I think the community development assumes that we don't have talented Black individuals, and that is not true. So although for the community, for the folks who are underpaid attention to, if you will, looking for another term, there's work that needs to be done to ensure that we curate our talent. However, there's another set of work that needs to be done at the institutional level to make sure that it's more diverse. For those of the folks that are on the call, I want to just give some numbers that I researched about the demographic of New York State and then up into Onondaga County specifically. So I work in New York City specifically, and I'm from the city. And across New York State, there's 2.5 million students K through 12. You break that down to New York City, there's about 1.1 million that's in the New York City region. When we go up to Onondaga County, decided to do so, there's 67,000 students within the school system K to 12. You look at that breakdown, there's 63% white, 19% black. Pretty similar demographics to, what's happening in New York State. What I want you to also pay attention to is the difference when you start breaking out the rural areas. So in Syracuse City, there is 22% white as opposed to 50% black. But when you break out Baldwinsville, Fayetteville, JD, Liverpool, Manlius, the population is 88%, 80%, 95%, 82%, 95%, 88%, 86% white, with 1%, not 1%, 3%, 2%, 1%, 6%, 4.8% black as a comparison. Now, two in particular that stuck out to me is Marcellus is 0.3% black, Skinny Atlas 0.2% black. The reason for me going into this, from a software and a technology standpoint, when there was zoning in the state of New York and across the United States of America, there was strategic technology and data-driven decisions to ensure that segregation perpetuated itself. And where you live determines how much your generation and your following generation will earn. The reason why I bring this up in this particular context is to understand that if we do not put a strategic effort in place from a technology standpoint, we will continue to see this perpetuate itself, because the numbers of where we live is very synonymous to what happens in the tech industry. The numbers are almost identical, and what we see as what we see in terms of what's there. And that was the purpose of kind of going into that as we start to look at solutions. It's not, this was a strategic issue to make sure that Black individuals were economically castrated from a system. That was a little deep, and I apologize if that was too deep, but I wanted to lay the foundation to show that this is a multi-layered approach that is necessary and needs to be strategic inside of the institution for us to advance. Comments? Is there something that's on? Can someone give me something that's on the one to pivot?
Hi, Damani. Hi, my name is Yolanda Mitchell. I work for National Grid. I just like to make a point. I hear a lot of discussion of how do we make marginalized people of color more marketable to companies? How do we make sure that they're included in different opportunities? I would like to propose, because again, you mentioned, the low percentages of minorities that live in like Marcellus, Skinny Atlas, and so on. But you have a lot of people of color that may come to Central New York for schooling, for Lemoyne, for Syracuse University. How do you make it more appealing for these people to say, you know what, I want to stay in Central New York. They have the Microsoft, they have all of these opportunities going on. How do you make it more appealing for minorities and people of color to want to stay in this area?
This is Gail Jackson. Can you add it when you comment on that? And this is, I'm actually Rose or Jackie's cousin, and I'm down in Rock Hill, South Carolina, but I was born and raised in Syracuse. When you add to, or if you could add to, not only entice the graduates to stay in the area, but what are the leaders doing to entice companies to come to Syracuse, New York, Marcellus, in the outlying areas?
Thank you, Gail, and thank you. Was it Yolanda from National Grid? Was that accurate?
That is correct. Thanks.
Yolanda, question for you: Is there a ERG at National Grid locally? An enterprise resource group?
There is, and I'm actually very active in that group.
Okay. So for those of you who know in corporate organizations, there's something called ERGs, or enterprise resource groups, and these are affinity groups that group like-minded individuals together to advance causes. I would encourage, if you're not engaged in your ERG and you're at an organization, that you think about getting involved to push and hold these companies accountable to the work that you're trying to do. To Gail's point, I think that there is the work that has already started with attracting companies back to this to here. I think it's going to be the shoulders of organizations like CenterState and the like, to ensure that they are holding these companies accountable for the culture that they are fostering internally, and ways in which, to go back to Yolanda, I would say is, when we talk about hiring, we need to do it at a few different stages. What I see most often is we only look at the entry level opportunities. And although those are important, there is something that needs to happen at the board level. There's something that needs to happen at the executive level. There's something that needs to happen at the mid-level management level in regards to hiring and promoting. And then there also needs to be an aggressive strategy in regards to recruitment and bringing on new talent. However, if you walk into the conversation only addressing one of those pillars and not having the strategic conversation across the board, it can almost be just a checkbox that the organization is playing lip service. So not to say that you are trying to affect all four areas, from the board level to the executive management to the mid-level to the recruiting. However, if the conversation is not on the table, it means that it is not important, and they don't perceive that we have an internal problem, and we're not fully embracing trying to make the changes necessary to ensure that our company is as diverse as it can be. So Marcus, I don't know if you caught that, but under hiring, there's 4 areas that we need to focus on. So if we can add that to I think one of those boards, that'd be beneficial.
And Damani, this is Donna again. I don't know if you want to add to that, and if you do so, we'll give you the time to do so. I wanted to flag it is 1 o'clock. I think that we were just getting into the conversation really good. It's very riveting. I'm getting text messages about how important this conversation is. What I'm thinking, Juhanna, is why don't we set up another conversation, same topic, bring back Damani and the rest of the team and invite them to come back. And let's go deeper in this. I think there's a lot to be said. Damani, I'm very impressed that you're the VP of, Blacks on Wall Street. We know, at least I read recently, that there's an investment firm, a Black-owned or Black-led investment firm that's opening up on Wall Street, the first of its kind. There's all the history from Tulsa, that we're, becoming more familiar with in these trying times. So for all those reasons, I'd like to kind of get this conversation and give us much more time to have the conversation and go deeper and use the Jamboard and these topics as the things that maybe to kick it off with and follow up on our conversation. So is that a fair proposal?
Certainly, that sounds amazing. I'd love to.
Yeah, I would love to do that too. But anyway, if you have any last remarks before we get back to the summit, please make those, any closing remarks, and then we'll transition to the next segment.
Hi, Miss Donna. It's Gail Jackson. I don't know if I'll be here for the next one, but I do know I'm probably 30 plus years into being a business analyst and a technical analyst. One thing I would recommend speaking on is the educational piece, is that the youngins need to, I use youngins, to get them to understand that your degree doesn't necessarily have to be in IT. My master's is in IT, but my undergrad and my associates, accounting and business administration. And to utilize those electives wisely. Mm-hmm. You can use your electives wisely. Mm-hmm. So just education is huge. Mm-hmm. Hands-on experience, of course, but education is big too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that comment, Gail, and thank you for highlighting that. A couple of things. Number one, please share your information. I think you said your cousin invited you, in some kind of way. We would love to have you join the conversation again. We don't want to miss you. And then my second point is that you are absolutely right. I work, at Microsoft. We have, somewhere between 120 and 140,000 employees worldwide at any given day. And of my experiences, the majority do not have degrees in tech. The majority absolutely do not have degrees in tech. It is a creative environment. All types of backgrounds have come together to form what we know as a tech company, but at the end of the day, especially like I can just name for my team, there's like 6 or 7 of us. I'm the only one that has a degree in computer science. I am it. And my team happens to look like me, which is also an anomaly. How my manager was able to bring us all together in that way is just kind of amazing. But I just wanted to underscore that you are without a doubt right. And I think any thriving organization, if they're not inclusive, if the people don't have varied backgrounds, if they don't have representation from all races and all demographics, then that's why they may not be thriving the way they could be. Yeah, so great point. Use those electives, like you said, take advantage of them to round out your skill set, but don't be afraid of joining a tech company or getting involved because you don't have a degree in tech. That is probably not required in most of the roles. Yeah, so thank you for that comment. So we're 5 minutes over. Thank you very much for leading this discussion. As you can tell, we were just really getting into it. And we're going now to switch to our Syracuse Minute with Marcus Webb. And welcome back, everyone, from the other breakout where we see you. Thank you for being here. And we're going to get right back on track. Thanks, everybody. And Marcus, over to you.
Donna, I'm going to play a video here of Marcus. 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
How's it going? My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm the Economic Inclusion Fellow at CenterState CEO. To give an overview of tech and culture, we must first talk about Generation X. Generation X is a CenterState CEO initiative that's focused on attracting and retaining diverse talent to available opportunities in Central New York, fostering opportunities for career advancement, and connecting diverse professionals. Next, focus specifically on the technology industry and dedicated to community engagement efforts that promote diversity and inclusion in tech. This initiative is funded by the J.P. Morgan Chase Advancing Cities Grant and aims to drive inclusion into the Syracuse Surge Plan. Syracuse Surge is a partnership between the City of Syracuse, Onondaga County, and key community members across different sectors. This partnership has led to a series of investments in the tech infrastructure that will position Syracuse as one of America's smartest cities. Through his J.P. Morgan Chase Advancing Cities Grant, CenterState CEO is helping to drive inclusive growth strategies into the Syracuse Surge Plan. That's where tech and culture comes in. We seek to connect local and national professionals, entrepreneurs, and tech potential candidates to work through innovative programming and events focused on diversity in the tech sector. Tech and culture is very important because it is focused on creating an inclusive economy. As technology becomes more deeply integrated in all of our lives, making sure individuals from all backgrounds are reaping the benefits of the vibrant tech community here in Central New York is essential. We also place a high importance on the development of our local talent. Take me, for example. My fellowship here at CenterState CEO is funded by the same J.P. Morgan Chase Advancing Cities Grant. This has given me the opportunity to help lead this tech and culture initiative and make real change in the community that I was raised in. As I continue to do this work and learn more about economic development, community engagement, and growing technology in Central New York, I continue to build strong relationships and gain extensive knowledge that has helped me develop as a person and a young professional. Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who came out to the Surge Summit and participated in this event. Just wanted to give a quick overview of the next two events that we have coming up. October 22nd, we have a Diversity and Women in Tech event coming up, presented by Jamie Sternlich. Jamie, if you're in the audience, appreciate you. Jamie is a transplant to Central New York and currently working as the Director of Technology, Data and Policy at the Elvina Group, which is a technology consulting company based in Syracuse. We do a lot of work in partnership with the Elvina Group, along with Kristen. So we truly appreciate all of your efforts and work. During the event, Jamie will go in depth about, the work that she's doing with the Elvina Group. She'll also talk to the audience about her past experiences as a mechanical and aerospace engineer. She'll then talk about how she went from aerospace engineering to robotics, which is very interesting. I can't wait to hear more about that. And eventually how she brought her talents to DC and, worked with the U.S. Senate to translate data and technology to policymakers. Another event we have is October 29th, presented by Dr. Wayne Hilson, who currently serves as the Executive Director of the Office of Academic Diversity Initiative at Cornell University. Wayne has made it his duty to, volunteer to speak to underrepresented pre-college and undergraduate students about the power of education and, the power of a career in STEM. So this is exactly what the, event will be about. It'll be about how students or individuals from underserved communities can, open many doors through a career in STEM. So I'd just like to say thank you again for participating in this event. If you have any questions about tech and culture, you can reach me at my email, mwebs@centerstateceo.com. And thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. As you can see from the comments, you're very inspiring. Everyone is loving your video and feel that your work is amazing. I just want to give people an opportunity to maybe ask a question or two, and then we'll go into our next segment. I think we were all inspired, so I just want to open it up for the participants if they have a question or so. And Marcus, how do we follow up with you? What's your handle or email, Instagram, Twitter? How do we follow up with you?
You can follow me on Facebook, just Marcus Webb. You can also follow me on Instagram, Marcus Webb. But you can follow the Generation Next Facebook page and Instagram page as well.
Absolutely, great. I see a couple of people came on the video. Please shoot with your question. We'll take just a minute or two on that, and then we'll go right into the next segment.
I got a question. So Marcus, how is the gaming program gonna work?
The gaming tournament?
Yeah.
So what we're doing is targeting underrepresented individuals who, demonstrate their tech skills through gaming. So right now we're partnering up with OnPoint to get about 8 participants to launch the pilot just to see how it goes. And we're just gonna have them, play a game called Rocket League, because that game is heavily based on, teammates and just working together to reach the goal. So it'll be a pilot, and then eventually we'll open it up to the public for everyone to participate.
Okay, cool.
Great. Anything else before we transition? All right. Well, then I'll turn it over to our next segment here, and we'll continue going from there. I think it's with Juhanna and the team, and Anthony. Actually, it's Anthony. Thank you, Anthony.
Hey, what's going on? Can everybody hear me?
We hear you.
Oh, awesome. Thanks.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. So we got 2 Anthonys. That's great. I think she was talking to me.
Oh, I thought she was talking to me. Oh.
But we're gonna get to you. I think definitely love the introduce you guys. Anthony Frazier spoke earlier, tech entrepreneur myself, and today we're gonna learn some lessons from some other inspirational tech entrepreneurs. We're joined by Erin Horn McKinney, Anthony Obas. I hope I'm saying your last name right. Tanila Spencer and Yakeef Davis. And so I would love to start with Erin. If you take 90 seconds to introduce yourself and some of the work that you're doing, and we'll go around to all of the panelists and do the same.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And thank you, Juhanna, for having me. And special shout out to Donna, who I loved working with while I was in DC. I'm Erin Horn McKinney, and I am the founder and CEO of Black Female Founders, which is a global membership organization for women-led tech startups and female tech leaders throughout the Black diaspora. As well as being the founder and CEO of Access Consulting, which is a consulting and advising firm where we advise governments and other agencies and organizations on inclusive innovation and inclusive economic development initiatives. My background is as a serial tech entrepreneur and serial tech advocate and activist and entrepreneur, I like to say. I worked for 2 mayors advising tech innovation and entrepreneurship in DC, the past 2 mayors, and then went from there to lead tech inclusion initiatives at a venture firm in across Ohio and upstate New York, which is where I had the wonderful opportunity to get to know Juhanna, and now have relocated back to my hometown of Minneapolis just in time for the pandemic and the uprising. So that is my 90 seconds or plus.
Thank you. And Anthony, the other Anthony.
Well, thank you, Anthony, for the introductions earlier. Yeah, my name is Anthony Obas. I just recently graduated at Syracuse University, majored in marketing. I'm also shifting your music into a career, co-director of Soil. Yeah, just do a ton of lot, and I'm just here to inspire everybody using my story, and want to encourage all people to just join me on the rally. So there we go.
Perfect. And Yakif.
Hey everybody, so my name is Yakif Davis. Where do I start? Last year me and my friend co-founded one startup called Dream Vibes Entertainment, which was like a platform for college collaboration, particularly for like students of color. That was one of my largest entrepreneurial ventures. We grossed almost 6 figures our first year. And then the goal was then to pivot that into a technology platform. Also competed in Hack Upstate in 2019. I got placed 3rd for another tech project that we were working on called Resi, which was like an AI resume platform. Currently a student at Marist, finishing my data science and analytics degree, and currently the lead developer for a startup called The Collective. And I think you heard from Kelsey earlier today.
Right. Amazing story. And Tamila? Am I saying your name right, by the way?
I think you're saying it right. Yeah. Did you say Tanila?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Tanila. My background is in computer science and Spanish. So I started my startup last year in September or October sometime, and we're building a social media platform called Transverb. The company is called Be Genius, but the product is called Transverb. And what the platform does is it basically translates all user interactions in over 100 languages. So that looks like direct messaging, group messaging. So if we all spoke different languages like Yoruba or Chinese Mandarin or Spanish, we could all get in a group chat with each other and see each other's messages and statuses in our respective languages and stuff like that. So that's where I am. I came up to Syracuse to join the Tech Garden and been working closely with them just to kind of like, do some preliminary stuff before we release the full version of the application on the app stores. So that's all I got.
Nice. And I guess I'll start. The first question is like, we can start with Erin. Like, what inspired you to pursue work in technology?
Absolutely. Well, I kind of fell into technology unexpectedly in the sense that in the first .com boom, I was coming out of college and started my career in national advertising. And at that time, nobody wanted to work with the original .com companies as clients. They're like, they're not real companies. And so I would go to all these tech events and things like that. But interestingly, I never saw any women and I never saw any people of color. And literally, I would be ignored. And fast forward, I started my first tech startup in the early 2000s. And I didn't even think of myself as an entrepreneur because I had never seen look like me, and I was not welcomed into that community. And I think that really kind of planted a seed later. So fast forward, when I was living in the Bay Area and I saw a lot of my white counterparts in national advertising moving to tech companies and not being able to get opportunities to join those sales teams, and literally being told, hey, you went to an HBCU and we rank those schools differently, and so you rank lower. I was really baffled by that, and I like to say that that's really what charged what I call my Legally Blonde moment, where I was like, you know what, something's wrong, where whether it's as an employee or as an entrepreneur, I can't get support and like get into this space. Like there's clearly a wall here. And that led me to go to DC to get into tech policy and become an advocate and activist for women and minority participation in the innovation economy.
Amazing. And I would love to ask you, like, from building a tech startup in the early days before this I would say this craze has kind of captured the country. What do you feel like is the biggest difference between building a company then and building a company now? What do you feel like is the biggest difference?
Well, the biggest difference, I know people still feel a lot of the barriers that exist in tech, but let me tell you, it's way better in the sense that at least there's an acknowledgement of diversity, where before there wasn't even acknowledgement. It was just like, no one was being, the fact that somebody in HR could say something like that to me, like, you went to historically Black college, and that not be a problem. So the biggest difference now is that there's an acknowledgement. That doesn't mean there's been a full shift as it relates to a capital investment and just financial capital, but there has been starting to be a real intent around social capital, and including people into your ecosystems and inviting them. So there's a lot of programs and things that exist. When my second tech startup, which is while I was in the Bay Area, we tried to get in Y Combinator. We tried to get into a number of programs. This is in the mid 2000s, before I think what you're referring to is really the mobile app economy took off, and a lot of other things happened. Right. And would see at that time older white men running those programs and only younger white men getting in. Now, and then as there started to be a shift, you would see inclusion solved with only white women, really, right? But now starting to see some intentionality around including people of color, women of color. It's not anywhere near where it needs to be. And for those who aren't aware, still, just in even recent studies, out of all the billions of dollars that are spent in venture capital, still less than 8% goes to women and minorities of all of that money, right, in investing. And specifically for Black female tech founders, it's less than 1%. So it's like 0.00002 or something like that, right? And so the studies have shown that the most successful, or the average successful Black female founder receives around $47,000 to $50,000 in investment, where a failing white male founder receives $1.2 million. And that's and you're talking about a failing tech founder receiving $1.2 million, but a successful founder receiving not even $50K. So clearly strides need to be made. But we're starting to see, we haven't seen, a Black female Mark Zuckerberg yet, or Bill Gates, or what have you, but we know that it's on the horizon.
Definitely, and I think it might even be, some of the people on the panel with us today. Right. But Anthony, you spent a lot of time, in the music industry. You even have a book out, called "Shifting Your Music into a Career." I would love to ask you, because some of the knowledge industry to industry is transferable. So I would love you to tell us, like, what are some of the leadership lessons you learned from the music industry that you feel could be helpful to tech entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's so cool that you mentioned that. I'm so glad that I'm in a panel full of tech, because you have to understand the whole music industry has changed because of technology, right? We have the idea of streaming, which has killed a lot of artists, right? So for me, it's not to say that I'm anti-tech here, but it's to say that we have to understand as leaders of where do we see, various industries impacting. So as a leader, I have to see in different directions of how that impacts, if that makes sense here. Because for me, it's just not to say streaming has built a resume for artists in order for them to get acknowledgement as well too. But in this situation also, it's also helped, hurt artists in terms of generating their biggest income. So for me, that that also came as an inspiration for me to write Shifting Your Music into a Career, to show that, again, I'm using streaming as just an example here, but it's just to show that we can do it without streaming or with streaming together. We just need to make sure that we understand the knowledge. Just like tech, just like in any other industry, the knowledge hasn't been passed down to everybody. It seems as though there's an accessibility door in order to get to certain knowledge. Both, just mostly in the music industry, but I hope that's similar in the tech industry the same way as well too. Same issues, and that's why I came up with the book as well too, Shifting Your Music into Career Volume 1.
Right, and Keith. I've read up on you, you're a developer extraordinaire, man, seeing all the things that you put together, and congratulations also, you and Kelsey getting into Techstars in LA. I think that's a huge achievement. But what I would like to ask you is, like, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, especially from Syracuse, from all over, who don't have, co-founders who know how to code, who don't have a technical background, like yourself. What do they need to do to get to the next step? How do they get over that hurdle if they have this idea on building an app or a software?
That's a great question, because the reason I even started programming and said, oh, I actually care about this enough to take a class in it, was because I came up with an idea for an app and realized it was too much money to make it at a time, to pay somebody to make it. So I was like, well, I might as well learn how to do it. And that's why I'm here sitting in front of y'all right now. So it's definitely interesting. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that route for everyone. But I think it's a little challenging, and like something I've done personally to kind of address that is I've been doing kind of like a light form of like CTO consulting almost. Mm-hmm. And that someone's like, hey, I have this tech idea, or my friend's like, hey, somebody I know wants to do this platform but don't really know anything about it. They'll send them my way. I'll have a meeting with them and kind of give them a high level technical overview so they can see the pros and cons of mm-hmm. kind of each implementation. So when they do take that to have somebody develop, they actually have a framework to work within, as opposed to the person they go to says, in addition to me being the person you pay for it, I'm going to tell you how long it's going to take. I'm going to tell you what you should do. And there's always that question of, are they telling it because it's the best thing or because it makes them the most money? So it's definitely challenging. I think to some extent you got to just kind of find the best solution is finding a trusted technology person that they don't have to like be your partner. They don't even really have to be like, you don't have to give them equity or anything like that, but just somebody you trust to say, hey, I had this idea. What would it look like for me to implement this technically? So then when you do go to somebody that you're paying, you're not going as like a rookie or, somebody who can easily be played.
Right. And then so like I remember a while ago when I was getting into the tech world, someone told me, don't learn how to code, you should learn how to prototype. And yes. So what do you think that person meant by telling me?
Yes. And one of the things I do when people talk to me about their ideas, the last thing I'll say is like, hey, have somebody write code for this. I'll say, hey, like, do you have a wireframe for this? And have you actually thought about what this would look like? Have you? And because there's so much you can do before you actually get to somebody writing code, because you can use tools like Figma, which is free, Adobe XD, which is also relatively free, and you can kind of design and almost make it seem like you have an interactive app without having any code that you can go have people test and prove that it's actually something worth doing before you pay developers thousands of dollars to actually make it work. And what that also does is once you have that, it's having somebody actually develop it is way cheaper than if you say, hey, I have this idea, develop it.
Right. That's good advice, man. Thank you. And then I also impressed with your background, what you're doing with Transferb, and there's a lot of translation software out there in the world, a lot of apps, a lot of different people trying to solve this problem. What do you feel like is missing from the translation world that you feel like nobody gets? Like, what's the largest problem you think you're looking to solve and you're looking to bring to the table?
I would say that when we're talking about speaking other languages and people from different language backgrounds communicating, I'm bilingual, so I speak Spanish. And when I was learning Spanish in undergrad, I went abroad to Costa Rica. And what I noticed right off the bat is not being able to speak it fluently, but that culture barrier not really translating very well. So Transferb, the idea or the concept for it was born out of an undergraduate research project where I was trying to basically synthesize like language and technology and what that looked like. So like colloquialisms, as we know, machine translation doesn't really handle those properly. And that's ultimately the goal, is being able to like take in information like from a technological standpoint, like we do on our social media, because like, you know, you got things like Indian TikTok and Spanish memes, and you have all of this cultural like nuance inside of language that isn't really that translatable. So when we think about a technology like Transverb, where you can talk to people who are from a different part of the world, you will see that nature, or, you know, humanity, the root of who we are is pretty much universal. There's universality inside of like, you know, human nature. And so like with Transverb, that will chop down like the xenophobia that we face here in the US, kind of open people's minds to languages and cultures that aren't, you know, necessarily a part of their everyday life, because you'll be able to interact with people. And then you could think about what Transverb could do for like a doctor's office, or
Right.
or teachers who have to communicate with parents whose only language might be Spanish. You know, having a platform just as readily accessible as Messenger itself, Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. I feel like that's what's, because when we think of translation or machine translation, we think of going to Google, selecting 2 languages and typing back and forth.
Right.
We don't think of it, we don't think of the social component of language, and not just for the US, but for people all over the world, you know? So that's, I think that like, you know, language technology is missing that social application. And that's what Transverb is trying to bridge, you know?
Right, right. You calling me out, because I definitely go to Google and use that translator app like at least 3-4 times, you know, a year. And so, one more extra question for you is, you know, being, you know, a female founder of color in the tech industry, you know, have you, you know, what challenges do you feel like you face, and if so, what one piece of, you know, major advice would you give to, you know, other young women of color who may see this this panel?
I would say, so I'm from the South, so I went to school down South, and down South, it's predominantly white males who are in like computer science courses. And oftentimes the, you know, professors might differentiate between you and your white male counterpart, and, you know, think that he is automatically the stronger student. So like when you're in your studies, in your course of studies, and kind of building the foundation of your tech startup, or, you know, whichever route you pursue to start your business, you know, whatever it may be, don't be discouraged. Basically, me personally, as a Black woman, I just never had the struggle of identity. I never discounted myself. I never thought that I wasn't smart enough to accomplish this just because like all of my peers, you know, look different from me. I just kind of blocked that out and realized that like there's going to take a certain amount of like assimilation to the culture that's in corporate America and things like that. And that culture is white culture. And so not necessarily selling yourself out, but understanding the rules and how to play by the rules to get what you want. Because I feel like being intelligent and being Black and being successful, a lot of young Black people think that those things are mutually exclusive. Like, you know, you can only be intelligent, but I can't bring my Black self to the table, but you very much can. So I haven't had anything specifically that, you know, would happen to me other than my classmates being like kind of asshole-ish towards me. But as far as in the business world, I feel like, I don't know, I've been navigating it pretty well, and then people have been really helpful towards me. And if I feel like, you know, there's some sort of struggle in my experiences as a Black person, I kind of just set that aside and realize that I'm doing, first and foremost, the technology that I'm creating is going to be for all people. And even if people can't see that right now, I know that generations to come, it will be useful. So I kind of have like, you know, just like my sight is set on the future, you know, I'm future focused rather than like living in the issues of today. I'm like, if I'm creating tech that is obviously breaking down xenophobic and racist barriers, then I feel like, you know, that should be my main focus. And that's what I look to, you know?
Yeah. And Erin, do you have anything to add to that same question?
Sorry, I was having a hard time getting off unmute. I'm so glad you threw to me because I was like, I have something I want to say, but I don't want. I think, you put it in the chat, like, that's amazing, because I think the thing that I mentioned early on is that I just didn't see anybody that looked like me. And so if initially it was even that it was a barrier, I just didn't even notice. But, seeing people that look like you in this space is super important in identifying and finding those individuals, not necessarily to emulate them, but to, I think, be empowered and inspired what the opportunities are. But it doesn't have to just be you, right? Like, I just think the sky's the limit. And what I would say to young women that are coming up and young people in general, I think one of the things that I'm so impressed with kind of like millennials about this, and it wasn't something that was as open to us for those of us who started, and again, I've already dated myself, but earlier on, is think globally in resources and opportunities. We tend to think so much about like what's right in our backyard, like what's happening in our city, what's happening around the world, but especially now that everything's gone virtual, you can be in Syracuse and obtain resources from all over the world now. And so, one of the things that, I tell people, like I tell them about programs like Startup Chile, like check that out. Like there is non-dilutive capital that you can get to as a woman or just as a tech founder, but there is a specific program for women that helps you start up your company, and they don't expect you to stay. They're not trying, but it's a if you can't get resources near you in the way, one, look beyond your backyard, but also challenge those in your backyard to give you the resources. So if you don't have what you need, challenge the people around you. And I think it's just the activation of voice, which is what we're seeing right now in this moment in our country, which is so powerful. And I think before, our community tended to be so muted, and I'm just so empowered and or inspired by how empowered this younger generation is about using their voice and asking for and telling people exactly what they need and deserve.
Right. And speaking of using your voice, Anthony, you are building this personal brand, right? You have this personal brand. You're sort of expert on it. Entrepreneurs kind of have to do that for themselves now. So what do you feel like are some of the low-hanging fruit in building a personal brand you think most entrepreneurs, especially tech entrepreneurs, miss? What is something to do to help build our personal brand out?
Oh, awesome. I mean, Erin, I literally was going to bridge that. I know that question that Erin was answering to, it really kind of stemmed some fuel in me to say this, but we need to control the narrative of our stories here. We need to write our own story when we're creating a personal brand. The issue that I found, in the music game, whether in other industries when I was working, was that a lot of the times that we've had a lot of these organizations write our narrative for us instead of as entrepreneurs writing our narrative for ourselves. Does that make sense? Controlling the narrative that we preach that people see. But the biggest thing about building a personal brand. So a lot of the things that I do is I build within a family, with this idea. I love this idea of group economics, right? This idea of bringing everything together and keep it within, building the story within, making sure that it's within our family. So if one of my friends has a magazine or a local newspaper, I would love to be featured in it, because I know that I have control of the narrative, that I'm able to control the story. I think that's so important in the tech industry. I mean, I seen this documentary, 2 weeks ago, The Social Dilemma. Crazy documentary here. It's crazy, right? And it's just a situation of not to get on a rant here, but we see the situation of how we are perceived on media, how we're perceived and stuff like that. But if we just control the narrative, control how we want our stories to be told, we are able to build not only a personal brand for ourselves, but the genuine, authentic brand that we want to see our people see. You know what I'm saying? That comes with the music, that comes with the tech world, that comes with any other world that we do. It's just this idea of controlling the story that you want to tell people. You want to code the narrative to tell that you're best coded and control it. I just think that we need more hands-on, as young people and older people, we need more control and more, storytelling in that aspect. It just fuels something in me, that question. So Erin, that's an alley-oop for you. Thank you so much.
And speaking of control, Keith, you know, a large part of control is ownership. You know what I mean? And you're out here building applications as a developer, and you know, and a lot of what you're doing with the collective, even your startup now, is about around a lot of creative. And so, how are you protecting yourself? You know what I'm saying? You know, one question I get from a lot of, you know, young entrepreneurs is like, yo, do I need to get something copyrighted or trademarked? And you know, and you're out here building, like you got a ton of applications. How are you protecting yourself? Do you need to protect yourself? What's necessary? What's unnecessary if you're an early stage founder?
I want to preface this with I'm not a legal expert, so don't take this as legal counsel. Right. But I think it depends. I think it depends on where you're at. Code, for example, technically, it's copyrighted by default. If I'm understanding that correctly, at least when we're doing the hackathon, that's kind of what they briefed us on. So generally it's the way I've approached it is generally like when I talk about what I do and like when we talk about applications, there's just like little stuff like you really don't share the actual source code, which is like the literal code for the project. You don't really share that with people that ideally that aren't on the team. And then if there is some type of consultant or something, you know, you have an agreement that says, you know, you can't share this, and you're or like an NDA, and you're signing that I won't share this with anyone else. I won't disclose what I see. I won't go take this and use this in another application. As you go up, like, and then with other companies, you'll start to see they'll say what's every project that you're working on right now, and say are there any that are similar to what we're doing. So they don't even give you the chance to be like, well, it just so happened that my other project was similar to what you're doing. They nip that in the bud. So generally, it's just about you really want to be careful about who you share your source code with. It's normally, you're not at the stage where you need to really be concerned about, do I need to patent this software application? You want to guard it. You kind of want to guard it as if you were going to, but I don't think that's something you want to rush to do, especially because in the early stages, like you're struggling for capital, and once your money's gone, your startup's basically gone. So it's kind of tough for me to recommend somebody advocate for someone to get a patent that early in the life cycle. But yeah, generally I would just say just keep the source code safe. From like a cybersecurity standpoint, you know, don't use the same password for everything. Try to be safe about that. Kind of be mindful about the cloud platforms that you might host your code on and who has access, because that's another important piece. But generally, I would say that's it. And then for the people that are more concerned about less the code and more like my idea, I would say don't worry about that too much, because ultimately it doesn't really matter how good the idea is. It matters how good the founder and team implementing that idea is. So everybody can have the same idea, but nobody's going to implement that idea identically, nor will everybody have the same insight to actually make that idea successful.
Right.
So,
no, that's 100%. You know, being a you know, even though I'm not technically an investor, I've heard thousands of pitches from entrepreneurs being at a venture capital firm, and you know, I'll tell you right now, it's really not about the idea. Some people, they think their idea is original. It's really not sometimes. It's really all about that team, that execution, and how they carry it out. Tanila, I'll ask you this question and we'll open it up. You know, anybody else on the panel, feel free to answer the same question, but we'll open it up to the audience as well. But what advice do you want local entrepreneurs, local leaders to know about what you need to thrive, you know, as an entrepreneur in Syracuse? So I'll reframe that question. What advice do you want local leaders, you know, to know about what you need as a young entrepreneur to thrive in Syracuse?
I would say it's hard to speak to Syracuse specifically just because I've only been here since January, and like COVID affected a lot of, I guess, what I would have experienced in the city. But networking opportunities and like mentorship, I would say that those two things are very, very helpful. They worked for me in college, and having an objective view on your business process, kind of like what you're doing coding wise, and just, framing and just understanding your market, things like that, and having individuals who can, share their expertise with you, stuff like that. And so mentorship, networking opportunities, because sometimes being an entrepreneur, a lot of that comes from the creative process. And when you're a creator of anything, whether you're a musician or you're a programmer or you're an artist of any sort, burnout is very likely to happen, especially when you're first getting things off the ground, because you're literally taking nothing and making it into something. So having other people who are as inspired or as creative as you around, I feel like is a very, very important, because, it's like really easy to get discouraged or feel like you're in like this creative hole. That's one thing I feel like I would love to see in Syracuse, like locally, just other creative minds coming together more often.
Right. Great. Any other advice that anyone has on the panel as far as, how you can approach, leaders in your community, specifically Syracuse, on, what you need as an entrepreneur?
I think that cool. I think one of the best things to do is to actually sit down and actually brainstorm, right? It's very therapeutic to get an idea of what's going on, because you just never know what idea might hit. I think the simplest idea is the most effective idea, but you would only know that through collaboration, through brainstorming. So even if it means simply going through Zoom calls or going through, having these type of panels, you just never know what idea might hit. It's just like, I think it's well, but the simplest idea is the one that always hits. So Syracuse has a ton of network. I'm from New York City, but when I got to Syracuse, I didn't realize the plethora of like resources to build something, to build a name for myself. So use Syracuse to the best of his abilities.
Right. Yeah, Keith, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add and then kind of expand, if you don't mind. So I think for entrepreneurs generally, I would just say it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. And it's going to kind of require you to have that level of confidence that to everyone else would seem like you're kind of insane. To think that you would be the one out of everyone else to succeed in a way that they've never seen anyone that do it. So, and I think it's just like you got to get to a place where like you're okay with the majority of the people in your life saying that I don't know if that's really worth your time, what you're doing. I see you doing that 40 hours a week on top of your 40-hour-a-week job, stressed out, you're losing weight, you're crying to yourself. I don't think that's really worth it. What are you really doing? Are you really spending your time doing anything? Mm-hmm. And it's like you got to have the mental fortitude to say, I heard all that, and I'm still doing what I want to do. I still believe in what I'm doing. So I would say that generally, and then to kind of expand on the question of like what can like the local leaders do to help entrepreneurs, specifically like entrepreneurs of color. I think there's a quote by her name is Michaela Stevenson, and it says like when you center the most marginalized group, you address every concern that anyone else could have. So if local leaders are thinking how can we address entrepreneurs, and then like how can we help entrepreneurs of color? When you look at the challenges that entrepreneurs of color in the city face, which are connected intimately with all of these systemic issues, while you city. So when you do that, and when they approach it from that perspective and with that intentionality, that's when you could see the most beneficial aid that could come to entrepreneurs of color in the city. So that's what I would say on that.
Amazing. I hope we still have time. I see Donna popped up.
Yeah, we're at time. It's 1:50, and we're wrapping up the next segment with Juhanna, a tech rally. So we have 10 minutes.
Okay, well, I would love if Erin could expand a little bit on the leadership question, because I feel like she's worked with a lot of leaders in the space, and so maybe you can give us the other side of that question from someone who has been in the rooms with leaders and knowing what moves the needle. What advice can you give us about how we approach leadership, make change locally, especially in a place like Syracuse?
So, yeah, well, a couple of things. One, let me give a couple tips first, and then I'm going to take it to the leadership piece, because I think, one, I want to mention to entrepreneurs that all money isn't good money, okay? And I think a lot of people start pursuing venture capital and other forms of funding that might have predatory practices before pursuing opportunities that actually, not even realizing that there's so many opportunities, whether it's pitch competitions, whether it is grants, whether it's pilot programs and bartering systems to test things out. I mean, there's so many other ways to do what you're trying to do, including whether it's, we talked about legal earlier, there are programs that give pro bono legal. There are, for startups, there are programs that give pro bono, startup advising, like try to take advantage of all those things and keep your resources as long as possible. The second thing is make sure that you get tapped into the network and community, whether that's in Syracuse or the ecosystem, nationally and internationally. Do your part in making sure that you get connected. LinkedIn is amazing. You'd be surprised how many people will talk to you. The new hotness, though, right now, of course, for those who are on it or look into it, is Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is like an interactive podcast, and people that you normally wouldn't have, VCs, whomever, there you have an opportunity to actually ask questions and talk. But whether it's meetup groups, now with things being virtual, I mean, people are able to touch and talk to people that you never were able to do before. I mean, it's like, in some ways, as an entrepreneur, especially tech entrepreneur, the pandemic has been one of the best things that could have happened as far as like making people available. And last but not least, continue to be the subject matter expert. When we talked about this earlier, people aren't going to steal your idea and go after your stuff, and people aren't going to sign NDAs and whatever, because people don't have time to be the subject matter expert on something. If you know your ish, know it inside and out, you will be invaluable. And what you do is surround yourself with people, whether it's your advice, because another free thing to do is get an advisory board, or people that balance out your strengths and weaknesses and really round you out. So those are the three things I just want to tell as advice to entrepreneurs. But as far as being on the other side of the table, whether it's as a VC or somebody even in government, the thing that concerns me most when it comes to our community is we don't think and ask big enough. When we get in those rooms, let me tell you, there's times that I would sit in DC government and I would hear somebody come in and say, a person of color say, hey, it'd be great if you could just give us like $2,500 or $5,000 to start this program. Like, and even if that doesn't work, just don't get, like if you could just invite us to the room. Meanwhile, the white male counterparts were coming in. I would like a multi-million-dollar, multi-year, program. And I don't have anything. But I need that kind of money from you. Like, it was the most grandiose ask, and it just showed me the difference. So don't be scared to make that ask, because when you're making that ask, and that's your one time to make that ask, make it big and make it count, and make sure in every conversation you give an ask. There's so many times as a leader that people come in and talk to me, and I don't know what you're asking me for. I don't know what you want. So make it really clear that you end every conversation, and in closing, my ask is this. And what I need from you is this. But then also be willing to offer what you can contribute back and make it a win-win for everybody. So those are my final thoughts.
Thank you. That was an exclamation mark way to end the panel. Donna, I know you said we had a few minutes left, so I guess we can open the floor up for questions until we run the clock.
Actually, we have Juhanna, I think, coming up with the tech rally.
Okay.
So I would ask that if people have questions, post them, please, in the chat. And Anthony, hang in here. Maybe you can respond in the chat as well. And this way we can keep moving forward, okay? But thank you. That was very riveting. Erin, girl, I'm so glad you're here. This was awesome. And, thank you for participating. And to the entire panel, you guys were awesome. Thank you very much. Juhanna, over to you.
Yes. Well, I'm excited. I've been listening, but I will be honest, I also have been multitasking because I have reached out to everyone, including the deputy mayor, the president of CenterState, more of our staff saying, everybody should be here listening to this conversation. And as we thought about how do we end the day, Donna and the team that worked so effortlessly on this, or tirelessly, I should say, on this, we talked about how do we end this like really with a bang. We spent the past couple of hours here today talking about, you know, a very culture-centered, through a very culturally sensitive but also awareness lens, which I think is incredible, which I think we need to do more of here in Syracuse. And so I've been spending the time listening to you all, but also trying to cheerlead and tell people they should be here listening to your stories and the sentiment in the conversation, because I think it has been phenomenal. I've also been taking notes because I think in Damani's session with the Jam Board, it came across, and I know Liza's session today had a lot of thoughts shared there as well. How do we move this forward? I'm a very action-oriented individual. I don't believe in gathering people to have conversations just to have conversations, to put what we talked about today into action, right? And I think as we are closing out the session today, I want to really get you all excited about your presence and being here today, the contributions you've made to the conversations. If you didn't get a chance to contribute, we're going to be looking for more opportunities to get you all engaged and involved so that you can be connected, because we really are going to build a diverse, representative, culturally competent, culturally centered ecosystem of tech professionals, a tech workforce, and we need you all to lean in and be a part of that. We need your brilliance, we need your efforts, because this is going to make our community more thriving, robust, honest, and authentic community, right? And so I'm super excited, super excited. And I will say, I don't know that I started this high in energy this morning, let me just be totally honest. But I think it was seeing what just transpired today that just really has me fired up. And knowing that we have Yakif and Anthony Obas here, who are relationships that Marcus, who is our JP Morgan Chase fellow, you know, relationships he fostered, right? And they're sitting on the panel with those of the likes of Erin and Damani and Anthony Frazier today, who are doing work nationally and internationally to drive a more inclusive system. Like, that is powerful. And that's what I think when we talk about building bridges and being and thinking more creatively about how we are going to support and bring together diverse tech entrepreneurs. I think today is a manifestation of a lot of possibilities. And as I listened in on the conversation, I've heard from Yolanda Mitchell from National Grid and Gail, who came on. And Gail, I'm not even sure how you heard about today or how you got connected to it, but I think your points of thinking about how we as folks of color can get connected to tech trainings or to get into tech careers was really inspiring, even for me, because I'm not that great at technology. It intimidates me. And so even having you all on my screen today and Donna facilitating over the last 2 days, is kind of like even sending a message to me in the roles that I play, the goals that I've already met, like, Juhanna, maybe you can do a little bit of better job of understanding what's happening in the technology field. Maybe you should know what a cloud is, because Damani, I'm like, you do what? I don't know what that is, but why? Right? And the reality is it's because this space has been an intimidating for me, and I know it is for many others. And so I think today was just simply beautiful in a way that I hadn't expected. Even having insight and intimate knowledge of what the program was going to look like, but I didn't really think about how powerful the presence of having you all here today would be. And so I want to thank everyone. I want to let you know that there's opportunities to get more involved. Liza Simade, who's our Surge Workforce Industry partner, she's leading that work, and she has assembled tables, and she's fostering relationships within the workspace and thinking about what opportunities look like there. She's working with Tim Penix was on earlier from OCC, and so she is a person to contact there. Marcus Webb, you saw him on the video. He's been in and out of the sessions today, helping our facilitators. He is running the tech and culture effort. So if you thought this was powerful, we are cultivating more spaces to highlight great professionals that are already in the existing ecosystem, right? I think Anthony drove that point home today. I know Damani also focused on that there are people here, and let's stop acting as if we don't have folks available to us that are in the ecosystem. So reach out to Marcus, follow Generation Next. Tech and Culture is a subset of Generation Next, an effort that's geared at talent and diverse talent and retention efforts across the region. And so follow Generation Next on social media. Also come onto our website, CenterState.com, to learn about the next speaker series, who's up next, and what we have planned in regards to diversifying our ecosystem here in Syracuse and Central New York. Thank you all so much for attending, and hopefully today planted a seed, to take it back to Anthony Frazier's opening comments, that it planted a seed in you, and you will continue to work with us to help grow and achieve our goal to diversify our tech ecosystem here in Syracuse and Central New York. Thank you, and I'm going to hand it back over to Donna.
Well, thank you, Juhanna, and thank you everyone who's participated today. On behalf of the team, I want to again thank Mayor Walsh, County Executive McMahon, Dean Art Thomas from Syracuse University iSchool, and all of those who are the force behind Syracuse Surge. Thanks also to all of our speakers who participated with us both yesterday and today. And I again want to express our deepest appreciation to the Surge Summit planners, including Jen Tift, the Deputy Commissioner for the City of Syracuse, Lauren Child, Director of Communications at CenterState CEO, Dr. Juhanna Rogers, VP of Racial Equity and Social Impact, also from CenterState CEO, Sarah Weber, Director of Employer and Corporate Relationships at the Syracuse University iSchool, Josh Reynolds, Senior Account Executive at Microsoft, and our Program Manager and producers who are behind the scenes, Brett Layton and Cindy Clapperidge. And of course, thank you to all of you as our event participants. As a follow-up to today's event, we will be sending a thank you email and a survey to everyone who registered. And should you want to reach out to anyone on the Surge Summit planning team, you will also see our email addresses in that email, plus links to the recorded sessions from days 1 and day 2. So again, thanks to all for joining us these past 2 days. We hope to see you again soon in and around Syracuse as we work together to impact Surge. Thank you so much.